All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Tyler, and I'm definitely an alcoholic. Thank you guys all for being here today. As Paige said there, I am going to be discussing steps 4 and 5. So I'm going to say some things today that are, based on my experience. These are, if there's an opinion in there, this is my opinion based on what I've experienced in recovery. Either myself going through my steps or, having the privilege of taking several men through their steps along the way. If this conflicts with anything that you do, I love that you have a way of doing it. I hope it works. If you feel free to reach out and share some feedback. I'm totally open to it. I do not have a monopoly on how to do steps 4 and 5. I just have some experience, and that's why I'm here today, is just to share what I've gone through and my understanding of the steps as I take them from the big book. Anybody that comes to the Q&A meeting on Wednesdays knows that I am very much a purist for the book. It saved my life. It's saved a lot of people I care deeply about their lives. And I like to stick to it. If you do it differently, I hope it works. I'm not here to, create any conflict or anything like that. This is just my opinions on it, my views on it. I'm not going to go into too much about qualifying myself. I can tell you I am absolutely the real deal alcoholic, addict. I was not a hard drinker. I was not a casual user. I was, going as hard as I can for as many days as I can until I crashed and burned. And then I would, spend that time trying to pull myself out and fix my life. And then once things got better, I would do it all over again. I spent many years repeating that cycle over and over again, desperately trying to get some freedom from this disease. The only thing that I've ever found that's truly worked is in these pages in this book. For that, I will be eternally grateful, and I will never shut up about it. I will always talk about how wonderful this program is to anybody that wants to listen. I'm fortunate enough, I'm actually sitting in an adolescent treatment center right now where I just started, they brought me on for a role here where I get to actually just dump the big book into some teens that are struggling. And it's one of the most rewarding things I've ever done with my life. So, I, however, was not always as keen on the big book. Several years ago, I listened to the people that love me and care about me and pleaded with me to go and get some help. I'd hit a pretty low bottom in my life. The consequences were piling up. The repercussions were piling in on me. I couldn't really do much more. And the people that cared the most about me asked me to go get some help. I begrudgingly agreed to get them off my back, and I went and checked myself into a 12-step based treatment center. That was my first introduction to the big book. I was not ready. I was in no means ready. And I understand why, and anyone that's heard me speak on step 1 understands that. I knew I was powerless over drugs and alcohol, but I was still really good at managing the unmanageability of my life. And for that reason, I gave myself my own hope and thought that I could do things differently. So while I speak about step 4 and 5 today, I'm also going to speak about my errors in that. This is not me telling anybody how to do step 4 and 5. I am absolutely going to tell you how poorly I've done step 4 and 5 in the past, and then the consequences and repercussions of that. Which I'm sure most of you could probably figure out was a lot more pain and suffering before I actually decided that my life was truly unmanageable by me. And that was the big part is I couldn't see myself managing that unmanageability anymore. And I had to just throw in the towel and concede. So when I went to the first treatment center and I got exposed to the 12 steps in the book, the treatment center actually, took you basically through the steps, through the guidance of counselors, and they did some other stuff, to qualify themselves as a treatment center. And I went in there with a pretty serious prejudice and some heavy resentments against religion, as a whole. So I was not comfortable with a higher power. I didn't like the idea didn't really want to be a part of it. Also, looking back, I understand today that my ego was my higher power and there wasn't room for an actual God in there. So while I could kind of understand what they were getting at, I thought, yeah, I mean, I'll take a little bit here and there and I'll do my best. But I was the kind of guy that would sit you down, after a few lines of cocaine and explain to you all the reasons your religion was wrong. And you were going to listen to every word that I had to say. And you weren't going to get up from the coffee table until I told you we were done. And this was just, I was a monster back then. I realize today, the resentments behind this, and I've come to terms with that, and I've done the work around that. But when I was first exposed to the book and to the steps, I couldn't get over that higher power. So I thought, okay, well, I'll kind of play along. And the insanity of a true addict, alcoholic, having a massive lifelong resentment towards churches and religions, I did my first step 5 with a Catholic priest, which is just ludicrous, right? And then wondered why I didn't get anything out of it. And I think I had written a bit of a step 4. They gave me some worksheets at the treatment center. And I'd written out some things, they told me write down everybody you're angry with. And I was like, oh, that's easy. I got no problem doing that. I somehow managed to forget about some of the later columns in there. Filling up a list of my grudge list, all the people that pissed me off, that was easy. That was, no big deal. And then I'll just fill in the later columns after, like my parts, what it affects, all that stuff. We'll get to that after. And then I decided, because I refused to get a sponsor and I thought I'd be smart enough to sponsor myself, that I didn't need to sit down with another addict or alcoholic and do my step 5, that I could go to just some random, Catholic priest. The treatment center set me up with a church where this lovely man, was willing to take me in, give me his time and sit there and go through my step 5. He'd done several of these before with other men. And bless his heart for wanting to do that. And I walked in there with no sheets of paper because I was working the steps off the wall, not out of the book. And I thought, well, I'm just going to tell this guy my life story, and maybe I'll find some relief in that. I'll be able to get some stuff off my chest, and I'll be able to kind of be free from this. And I heard all these other guys at the treatment center coming back from there, doing their step 5s and being like, oh, I'm on the pink cloud. No, I feel so much lighter. I took this backpack full of rocks and I put it down. I was like, oh, well, that sounds lovely. So I walk into this room upstairs in this church with this lovely man. We sat down. I think he poured me a coffee and he said, where's your step 4? And I was like, oh, it's right here. I got it. Don't worry about it. And thus began one of the worst step 5s I could imagine. I just vented to this man. I got the stuff off my chest that I'd felt guilty about. I talked to him about some of the horrible things that I did, and there was a lot of them. I opened up, in a bit of detail about some of those things. And he sat there and he listened. And again, good for him. He's not an addict. He's not an alcoholic. He's taking time out of his day to do this for me. That's lovely. And it came to fears and there weren't really any there, so I just kind of skimmed over that portion of it. And, the sex conduct, I told him about some of the women I'd cheated on, and how I'd done some unsavory things. And then he looked at me and he said, I'm proud of you. Good for you. You're doing great, buddy. Keep up the good work. Go get him, Tiger, And he patted me on my back and sent me out into the real world. And I was like, wow, that did feel good. Now I know what all those guys coming back from the treatment center are talking about. This was fantastic. I feel this weight off my shoulders. I get to, walk free now. And that was very, very dangerous for me in that position, because I didn't get to experience the process of doing an actual step 4 and 5. Probably because I didn't have a sponsor guiding me through that process. And I just self-willed my way through this. And I got that ease and comfort. I got that temporary relief from getting some stuff off my chest. I basically had a very long confession session with this man. And he doesn't know any better, and nor should he. It is not his responsibility. He does not owe it to anyone to understand how a step 4 and 5 properly work, or the ideas behind it, or the process of how it's written in the book. It's not his job. It was my job as somebody pretending, at least at that time, that I wanted to do this program. And so I really, if anything, I let myself down in that moment. I went back to the treatment center. I told them, hey, I'm done. Like, let's go. What's next? Step 6 and 7. Perfect. Of course, I don't want to be a shitty person anymore. Let's go. I just got to say some words and I'm free from this. Wonderful. I'll make a list of people that I'm going to make amends to. I'll tag some of the easy ones right away. I'll go do my mom because she's just going to tell me how good I'm doing. Great. Step 10. Yeah, sure. If I hurt somebody else and they catch me, I'll say sorry. Step 11, yeah, I guess when I'm in trouble, I'll pray and maybe wait and see if something comes up. And step 12, I went out and I chaired some meetings and I cleaned some ashtrays at some meetings and poured some coffee and collected the 7th, and I was recovered. That was great. And then I stayed in the treatment center for a little while after that, and moved into the transitional housing, rebuilt my life, got a new job. Girlfriend took me back. We got a new place, got some stuff. And I stayed sober for a while. Like, I think I got somewhere between a year and a half. And then I forgot what I was doing. I forgot what I was told. I kind of removed myself from the program and I began relapsing again for several years, and burning everything to the ground. And I think the worst part about that was the mother of my children, my ex now, taking me in after this treatment stint, believing in me, having my back, standing there, willing to fight with me, and me just letting her down constantly, building up our life, burning it down to the ground. And her, me coming back home after disappearing for days, doing horrible things, with my tail between my legs, begging for forgiveness. And every time I did that, she looked at me and she said, why? Why do you do this? Like, why am I not enough? Why are our children not enough? Why is your job not enough? Your life is good, Tyler. Why do you do this? And she's not alcoholic. So she actually genuinely just doesn't understand this. And I'm forever thankful that only one of my children's parents suffer from this disease. But she just, with all the desperation she could muster, she looked at me and she said, why? Why do you constantly do this? Why do you build my trust up and then you break it? By the end of our relationship, she would ask me that question and she would say, I don't want to hear a single word out of your mouth if it starts with, I don't know. And I couldn't answer her. I genuinely, honestly could not answer her as to why I did the things that I did. Why, when I knew that if one drink meant 10 more and 10 more meant calling somebody and doing drugs for days, why would I take that first drink? I'd been sober, months, sometimes years at a time. And then inevitably I would just go back to that first drink. And she could not figure out why, and neither could I. I had no idea. I wanted to stop. I didn't want to make her hurt like that. I didn't want to break her heart again. I didn't want to let the people that love me down. And I couldn't see why. And then I did an actual set of steps directed by somebody that was 12-stepped themselves, that was, had something that I wanted. They were recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. And we got to figure out what I was missing that first time, what I did wrong the first time that kept me so sick. And I'm just going to jump into the book on page 63 at the last paragraph. It says, next we launched out on a course of vigorous action. I never had any vigorous action. The first step of which is a personal house cleaning, which many of us had never attempted it properly, that's for damn sure. Though our decision was a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us, the whys. Our liquor was but a symptom. here I am blaming all my problems on the fact that cocaine is a naturally addictive substance that, of course, once you start doing it, you can't stop. Of course, it keeps you up for days. Of course, you got to do all these horrible things to stay high. But it was just a symptom, right? So we had to get down to the causes and conditions. And I remember the first time I actually heard the words that were just written there, I actually got a little bit more hopeful. And I was like, am I actually going to get down to the why? Why do I do this? That can't, no. I wanted to, but I didn't know if I could actually believe it. And I thought, I don't know if I'm ever going to figure out why, you know? But at this point, I was willing to try. I was so desperate, I was willing to try anything. And I was fortunate enough to have a bit of an awakening already with the actual acceptance in step one that, of course, my life, I'm powerless over drugs and alcohol. I'm a maniac with drugs and alcohol. But my life was so unmanageable that I was willing to try, even for the wrong reasons, even for doing it out of spite to show everybody that this program wasn't going to work on me. It didn't matter. I was going to do it, and I was going to go through the motions. And then as I started to open the doors and start to talk to some people with some higher power, I started to realize that maybe I could just figure out what my own higher power was. Maybe it didn't have to be, you know, the statue in the church. Maybe it didn't have to be the same thing that man that tried to do my first step 5 believed in. Maybe I could just say, I don't know, and I want to learn. And then I started throwing out some prayers and just seeing what happened. And the eerie part is they actually started to be answered slowly, you know, in a treatment center where I was beat down and I was in a very controlled environment, but some really strange things started to happen around me. Some very spooky, you know, serendipitous things that I just couldn't really explain with, you know, my big smart brain couldn't really figure these things out. So I started to actually come to believe that maybe all these crazy people in the rooms and in the meetings and in the treatment centers and the ones that were still sober long after I'd gone back out, maybe they were onto something. Maybe I could actually call upon this thing that's been trying to have my back my entire life and trying to save me from myself. Maybe I could reach out to it and just see what's there. Not knowing where those prayers are going to end up, not knowing what exactly I'm praying to, doesn't matter. Maybe I can just do this. So I remember the day I went in to do my first actual step 4, a written inventory, the way it's designed in the book with very clear-cut directions. They actually wrote out a whole sample of it just for guys like me that couldn't figure it out and broke it down into the sections for very, very good, very, very important reasons. They had designed this thing. And so I started this, and I remember sitting in that room and praying before my pen hit the paper. And for once, I actually felt the presence of something godlike in that room. And I felt it behind me, and I felt just this energy in the room with me. And I thought, what am I so afraid of? If this thing just came down and joined me in this room and literally has my back, is standing here while I'm about to do one of the most courageous acts I've ever done in my life, truly courageous, because I'm about to face fears that I did not want to face before. What am I so afraid of? Why can't I just do this? Why can't I just start writing and see what happens? You know, I don't need to know what the finality is here. I don't need to know what the finish line is on this. I just got to start and start seeing what happens. And there was still a little bit of me holding on to that. Well, maybe I can leave some stuff out. Maybe I can hold on to a few things. You know, maybe let's just get going and see where it goes. And that was good enough. That was it. I just had to start. And all of a sudden, when that pen started putting some ink on the paper, it was like this floodgate opened out of me, where I was like, if we're going to do this, just do it. Just write this out. Even if you don't end up telling the person that you choose to do your step 5 with you, if you don't tell them about this, why don't you just write it, see what happens? Let's just go to the next step in this process. And I began, and I started writing out some things that I didn't think I would ever tell any human being, you know, things that I was so ashamed of, things that I didn't want to face, you know. The resentments list, that wasn't as difficult to write out, all the people on my resentment list. There was a lot of them, and some of them genuinely did me some harm. They absolutely did. I was a victim in some of these circumstances. Absolutely. The things that happened to me when I was a child, I did not ask for them. I was not a willing participant in any of that stuff. So when I had to write out the next columns, especially what my part was in this, we got a little bit confused there. Things got a little bit tricky. I couldn't really see exactly what my part was when somebody hurt me. Thank God there's a step 5 done with a God-centered 12-stepped person that helped me do that, because I don't need to know all that. If I know what my part is, great. If I think I have an idea what my part is, great. If I'm wrong, even better. That's where the good stuff. Sorry, guys, I had a little difficulty there. My problem is I think I'm too smart. So all the better. If I write the wrong reason down, if I write the wrong information down, cool. At least I wrote something. Great, because I'm going to walk into my step 5 with those sheets of paper this time. And we're actually going to sit down and go through that stuff. Great. I've got something going. So I began writing, and I couldn't fully understand how much these resentments affected. That third column is in my experience today, which is, a lot of step 5s at this point, with other men and 2 really powerful ones with me. I see how pervasive this disease actually is, how much it actually affects, how this just corrodes all the areas of my life if I leave it unchecked, And I thought, well, I'm just pissed off at these people. How can it be that powerful? And columns 3 and 4 in the step 4, that's where the money is today. Like, that's really the stuff that I focus on when I'm taking men through these steps. That's where the real growth has to happen. Because first of all, I have to realize how much this actually sucks, how much it's not just about the drugs and alcohol, how it affects all the areas of my life. And then I have to realize what my part is in that. Now, what I learned along the way, and thankfully I learned it very early in my recovery so that I could actually help pass this on to the men that I got to sit in those rooms with and do their step 5s. I can be a victim if something happened to me when I was a child, something happened to me when I was an adult, and I didn't ask for it. I was no willing participant. I am a victim. The reason that I am a willing participant is because I'm still holding on to it. That may be the only reason. That may be the only thing that is my part in this situation, is just that I am unwilling to let this go, that I need this. I need to wear that victim badge like a bulletproof vest, because I don't know who I am without being the victim to this situation. This is something that happened to me and it became part of my core of who I am. But I don't get to hold on to that anymore. If I'm doing this like I agreed to do in my step 3, I got to let this stuff go. I don't need to know how. I do not need to know how to let this stuff go. That is not where we're at this point. I just need to understand that my part may just be that I'm carrying something with me that is hurting me. And I got to do something about it. The same way as I didn't choose to be an addict or an alcoholic. I never signed up for that. I don't remember ever making that choice. And that's fine. I didn't choose to be an addict and an alcoholic, but it is my responsibility to recover. Now that I actually understand what that means and that I am an addict and an alcoholic, I got some work to do here. And I have a responsibility to be free from this disease, to recover from that seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. That is my responsibility. So how do I do that? I look at what my part is on this. And we can talk all day about what these horrible people did to me and how much it's affected me and why, great. I can't change that. So what can I change? Well, I can change my part in this. I can change what I'm contributing to this situation or not contributing in most cases. So when I look at how pervasive this is in my resentments, and I understand that it's just affecting every area of my life, And then I start to look at the patterns, and I'm like, okay, well, it's pretty much all these areas in every one of my resentments. And maybe some of them weren't as, all inclusive, but most of them, I could see the patterns in this as I'm writing this out. I haven't even spoken to anyone about this yet. I'm just writing, and I'm already starting to put some pieces together. And I don't like that, because I'm like, oh man, maybe this is actually working. Maybe this is actually correct, you know? And I don't like looking at this stuff. It tells me in the book, a business that takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. Okay, so I'll look at myself like a grocery store, the produce section, no one's gone through and checked to see if the produce is fresh anymore. And I've got these rotten tomatoes just sitting there stinking up the place. And then what happens when you bring new tomatoes in there? These nice, fresh, juicy, firm, ripe tomatoes, and you put them right next to it. Well, the rotten ones are going to ruin those too. But if nobody's going through there to actually get rid of the stuff that is ruining all the produce, well, nobody's going to want to shop there. Why would they want to? This place stinks. And that's why I need to actually start looking at this and be able to accept the fact that I got some work to do here. It's not just going to happen just because I understand that those tomatoes are rotten. I got to get rid of the tomatoes. Otherwise, what am I doing? I'm just going broke, and I came in spiritually bankrupt, and I don't like that. I can come to terms with the fact that that is the truth. Now I got to get back at it. I got to start building this business of Tyler back up. And so as I'm going through and I'm starting to put these pieces together, I'm like, well, no wonder I'm broke. Like, look at this stuff. I'm already putting the pieces together, and I haven't even got my ass kicked by my sponsor yet. And I'm like, okay, I don't like this, but I trust this. So I'm willing to move forward. Then we get to fears. Now, I wasn't afraid of anything, I was fearless, and I would do insane, absurd things to prove how fearless I was in these situations. Fighting, loved it. I used to do it all the time. I would fight the drop of a hat just to prove how tough I was. Well, isn't that based in fear? Why am I so afraid of what people are going to think if I'm not fighting this guy that's calling me names? What am I afraid that I'm not going to get? Am I not going to get the respect if I don't do this? Am I afraid that this man's going to hurt me? He hasn't even come up and tried to actually, physically come near me, but I'm ready to fight him because I'm afraid, because I'm a scared toddler in a giant man body, and all I know how to do is to be aggressive in those situations when fear comes up. Anger, all of my anger, and there was a lot of it over the years, was based in fear. But I couldn't see that without taking the inventory, without actually looking at this and starting to get really, really honest. And as soon as I started to understand really what those fears looked like in my life and how often, and this one I actually had to have some help from one of the counselors in the treatment center I was in, who was a 12-step God-centered person. They walked me through and they challenged me and they said, what do you mean you're not afraid? You're afraid, I thought I was smart. Well, I'm kind of afraid of spiders. I'm kind of afraid of heights. Like I get a little bit of vertigo if I'm standing on a really high belt. They're like, shut up. That's not what we're talking. That's not what we're talking about. And they pushed me hard enough to actually start to peel back some of these fears. And there was some stuff on there that I just did not like. And I was like, oh, and how pervasive was that fear? It touched every area of my life, everything. I was so based in fear. Every decision I made, every action or inaction I took was based in fear. I was afraid that if I didn't control everything, then I wasn't going to get the outcome that I wanted. And I didn't like that because lack of power, that was my dilemma, right? I learned that in step 2. I want more power. I want more control. I want more of everything that I think I need. I don't have an idea what I need. I got no clue what I need, but I'm going to pursue this to insane ends, and I'm going to hurt anybody in my way. And I'm starting to see these patterns come out, and this fear is just everywhere. And again, I haven't even had my eyes fully opened to this yet because that didn't come until my step 5. But I can start to see that this fear is just controlling everything. If I was afraid I wasn't going to get something, or I was afraid I was going to lose something, I became very selfish and self-centered, very, very dishonest, and that's all fear-based. So as I'm starting to put this together, I'm like, wow, who even is this guy? Like I've never, this person I'm reading about on this paper, I didn't even know he existed. Perfect. That's exactly the realizations that I need to start coming to if I actually want to get better. And then it was taught to me that sex conduct, it has nothing to do about the physical act of intimacy, the women that I've slept with. No, we need to start finding out how Tyler behaves in relationships. Now, romantic relationships are a big factor in my life. They've influenced most of the major decisions that I've ever made in my life. They have made me feel amazing. They've made me feel horrible. They've made me drink. They've made me get drunk. They've all this stuff. Okay. So let's take a look at how Tyler operates in some of these relationships. So any romantic relationship that I had needed to go on there. This wasn't just the women I cheated on. This wasn't just, there's no shortcuts here. There's no grouping anything together. We're gonna peel this back, and we're gonna put down everything and everyone, and we're gonna start to look at where those patterns are. And I did not like what I was starting to see there. That was really uncomfortable for me, because I thought I was a pretty stand-up guy. I thought I was a good partner. I just made some mistakes, and it was really just when I was drunk or high that I would mess things up. Well, that's just not really the case when I take a look at the facts. The facts are telling me a lot different here. And I don't like what the facts are. And that is perfect, because I had to shatter that reality of who I thought I was, or this image of who I thought I was, because it wasn't serving me. If I was correct about all these things that I thought coming in here, why the hell was I sitting in a treatment center writing out a step 4? If I was so smart, what the hell was I doing sitting there doing this? If I knew better, why was I back again? Why did I relapse so many times? So the humiliation of having to go through this was exactly what the medicine that I needed. And then I got to sit down and actually work out a step 5 with another man that was not willing to co-sign my shit anymore. There was no holding back with this. I start reading through this stuff, and he starts challenging me. And at this point, I was using a temporary sponsor that, I had gotten because I was still in the treatment center. Fortunately for me, I got out of the center, and I got a sponsor in the rooms, and we started at the beginning of the book, and we worked our way through, and we did another 4 and 5. And that's where the rest of it, actually got addressed, some of the stuff that I had missed. And some of it was just fog, like I wasn't intentionally leaving anything out on the first one. But I was also still pretty sick. I was fresh into a treatment center. There were some things that hadn't really come clear yet. So give that a little bit of time, these things to come up, and we can sit down and we can do this again. And one of the greatest gifts that man gave me the second time around was showing me the selfishness, the dishonesty, the fear, and the resentment in all of these categories, in all 3 sections of my step 4. Because that's what I had to fight against. That was the lies. There were countless defects of character. Like I couldn't even count them. It would take me years of sitting there dissecting all this stuff for me to put together a completely thorough list of all the defects of character. But that's not what I needed to focus on, because every one of those defects of character was rooted in selfishness, dishonesty, fear, and resentment. So we started to put some heavy work into tracing each of these things back and figuring out, was it selfish? Was it dishonest? Was it fearful? Was it resentful? Lo and behold, the most impactful parts of my step 4 were based in all of those. And this was great foreshadowing for what was to come in me actually taking on the disease of addiction in recovery, was that I started to realize that almost every single thing that disturbed me, anything that wasn't God's will, that was Tyler's will, was based in fear. So it all started in fear. I was afraid I was going to lose something. I was afraid I wasn't going to get something. I was afraid I wasn't going to be in control. Whatever form of fear that took in that moment, that created this fear inside of me that created a selfish response. So this staircase, these 4 steps of what my actual causes and conditions were, what my actual disease looked like, in a matter of defective character speaking, instincts gone astray, whatever you want to call it, started in fear, created a desire to be selfish because I could control this. Things aren't going my way. Let's throw some Tyler into this situation and he'll be able to fix it. He always has, right? So it creates this level of selfishness. Well, if I'm now fearful and selfish, it's really easy for me to get dishonest to get what I want. That's a small step to go from selfishness to dishonest, because if I got to lie to you a little bit or manipulate you, great, because that's going to get me what I want. There's not really a big deal to that. Then what happens? Well, it doesn't go my way. And when it doesn't go my way, what am I left with? Just a big plate of resentment. So understanding how these four things are so impactful in my life allows me to start to watch for that. And I know we're doing step 4 and 5 today, but I can't in good conscience talk about step 4 and 5 in my life without 6, 7, 10, because I now have an understanding of how selfish, dishonest, fearful, and resentful I am. And I don't want this. I don't like this. I can actually see how this has been the why. The why, Tyler? Well, because I'm selfish, I'm dishonest, I'm fearful, and I'm resentful. That's why I drink. That's why I do drugs. That's why I shop. That's why I cheat. That's why I work like crazy. That's why I'm addicted to money and things and all this chaos in my life. That's the why. It's that simple. It's not any more complicated than that. And every single defect of my character, I can trace back to those 4 things. What a gift that man gave me. Because without that, I would have been out here trying to fight off 1,000 different defects of character. And that sounds like a lot of self-will to me today. And it sounds exhausting. Honestly, who has time for that? And the way I explain it to the men that I get to work with today is, think of, when we're looking at steps 6 and 7, think of this tree, right? And all the leaves on the tree are the defects of my character. And it's a big, healthy tree. Well, if I want to just go pick a leaf off, well, what's going to happen? That leaf's probably going to grow back, or I'll be busy picking leaves over here, and then this one's going to grow back while I'm over around the other side, and I'm picking off these defective leaves, and they just keep growing back. Or maybe I get a few of them off, and I clean up half the bush, and then the other half comes back. What if I just got to the root of that? Would that not be a more effective way to get rid of that? Seems like it would be, and it makes a lot of sense to me when you put it like that. So I can explain it to these men that in the 4 and 5, my goal is for them to see what the roots of this is, what the real causes and conditions of a step 4 and 5 are. Great. That was a gift that was given to me that I practice today. Every day I try my best to practice this, because in a step 6 is the realization that I don't want to have these things anymore. I said I wanted to live in God's will. I want 100% perfection in that, in a step 6. I want to be free from this. Step 7 is, I'm never going to be perfect, and I can't stop trying. Those things have to be simultaneous. I have to be humble enough to know that I will never be completely free from the selfishness, dishonesty, fear, and resentment, and I will never stop trying at the exact same time. Now, how do I do that? That sounds like a lifelong journey of constantly battling these things that made me sick, and I got to keep my guard up. And what if I let my guard down? Then, well, that's fear. Okay, well then, do I have time to do all this? That's fear. Yes, I have time to do it. There's clear-cut directions. There's a 4-step process in the step 10 where it tells me to continue to watch for these things. And when they crop up, I pray, I talk to somebody, I make an amends if I've hurt somebody, and then I stop thinking about Tyler. I get away from Tyler, because selfishness and self-centered, that's who I am without recovery. I don't want that. I'm willing to work on all these defects on every front for the rest of my life, but it doesn't have to be a full-time job. It just has to be when I see them crop up. So how am I going to watch for them? Well, if I have a really good understanding of sitting there and going through a thorough step 4 and 5 with a man that can call me on all this stuff and take it back to the roots, then I understand when I have the urge to be violent, that's fear. I'm not going to worry about the violence. Malice, that's not my defect of character. What it is fear. Okay, now I know what the enemy is. Now I know what to do about this. I've spotted the fear. I've seen it crop up. I pray. Thank you, God, for allowing me to be free from another one of my defects of character. Get on the phone, call somebody, go see somebody, talk out what this is. If I've already acted on it, which in early recovery was usually when I saw these things crop up, okay, make an amends. We're good at this, right? We've done a bunch of step 9s now. We've made the massive amends in my life. Why can't I go make the smaller ones that I've had pop up in recovery? Great. Now stop being selfish. Go find somebody to turn my thoughts over to, because if my thoughts stay in here, then that's a gross place. That'll start to get real crazy real quick. That's how I obsess. And I know that obsession is one of the parts of my disease. So how do I get free from this? Well, I got to see it coming. So I have to have a good understanding of what that looks like. You know, when am I being selfish? Well, I realized that through my sex conduct portion of my step 5, that a lot of times I didn't realize there was 2 people in this relationship. There was a whole ass other human being on the other side of this relationship that I was just ignoring, that I wasn't taking seriously, that I didn't know how to treat, I didn't know how to respect, because I was selfish and self-centered. It was more about what did I get out of this? I'll be the best boyfriend you've ever met if I'm trying to get something from you. You know, I'll be honest and I'll be loyal if I'm trying to prove something, or if I'm afraid. What if I'm afraid I'm going to lose you? Well, that's fear-based. That'll create a sense of selfishness. You know, what if I change my behaviors in order to elicit a response from you? Well, that's manipulation. That's dishonest. And that's me trying to get an outcome out of this situation. Well, how am I going to ever have healthy relationships? It's pretty simple. I got to figure out what to do by looking at my sex conduct. Pretty much do the opposite. You know, that's where my ideals lie, is basically in the opposite of all the things that I did before. Because at my core, I did want to be a good man. I never wanted to be a shitty partner. I never wanted to be a horrible human being. But my instincts had gone astray at some point. And again, just like I did not choose to be an addict or an alcoholic, I didn't choose for my instincts to go astray. This was a survival method. At some point in my life, I picked up these instincts that, for whatever reason in that moment, probably served me. You know, at some point in my early years, and I can pinpoint that location actually, violence actually served me. It protected me. It kept me safe, you know, from people that were trying to hurt me. So then, like a good addict, I took that and I just used it in every situation that I thought I could get relief from. But I see these patterns, right? I see that these instincts that were God-given, you know, they went astray. And it does not matter why or when. How is very important, but I just need to know that they did go astray. So along the way, at some point, I did something that served me, and I just couldn't let that go. If it worked once, it's going to work every single time. And my disease made me blind to the fact that it just really wasn't working anymore. That was one of the shittiest parts about my disease, is it convinced me that even though it hadn't worked the last 1,000 times I'd done it, I'll try it again, because this time it'll be different, right? Over a long enough course of time, I can't differentiate the true from the false. So maybe if I haven't lashed out in anger in a while, I think, well, maybe now is a good time to get what I want by using anger. And I start to see these patterns, and I start to understand I'm not a bad person. I just had some defective qualities about me. I had some broken pieces, and it doesn't matter how they got broken. I could go back and point the finger at every single person that broke any one of those instincts, and when it happened, and it will not make me better. It'll actually make me sicker, because now I'm focusing on them. I'm focusing on their part in it. And that is not where my solution lies. My solution lies in the only thing in this world that I can change, which is myself. So what's my part in this? What can I actually control? Because if I look at this mountain of shame that I have when sitting there and reflecting on my step 4, and I haven't actually started to work out the process yet in the step 5, there's a ton of shame in there, right? And today I understand the difference between guilt and shame. Guilt is the things that I do. Shame is who I am. Well, if I do enough guilty things, I'm going to start to feel pretty shameful. I'm going to feel pretty horrible about who I am. I'm going to have a really hard time looking in the mirror every day. But that was created by the guilt. These things that I had done, what my part in these situations was, that's what built up the guilt. And then never stopping to actually address the behavior, see if it was working, see whom I had affected, and then tried to do anything about it. Well, no, I never had time for that. I was too busy trying to manage my life. So as I'm sitting there looking at all this shame, and I'm feeling pretty horrible, thankfully, I got to go and deal with a man that said, we're just going to focus on the things that you did, not who you are. You're a good man, but you've done some bad things, and we need to look at those. And then we need to get ready to not do those things anymore. We need to understand why I did those things. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to combat them, you know? And one of my favorite lines in the step 3 prayer is, take away my difficulties, that victory over them. Victory. There is no unconditional surrender of my defects of character. That's not how it's written. That's not how it's played out in my life. I got to go to war with these things, but I got to know who my enemy is. Otherwise, what am I going to fight? I don't know. I'll get lost. I'll start fighting the wrong things. I'll be, friendly fire over here. No, if I want to have victory over this disease, if I want to have victory over the difficulties, if I want to have victory over the whys, why do I do the things that I do? I got to understand what my enemy is. And then I got to have a spiritual kit. I got to have a toolkit. I got to have some people that have my back. I got to have somebody else that I can rely on that doesn't see things through Tyler's eyes and that will call me on my shit. And then I can go to war. Then I can head out and try and find some victory over this. Then I can start doing step 10 is really what it's telling me, because that's where I get some freedom from this stuff. And living in those step 10 promises, that to me is what recovery is all about. I don't want to fight anyone or anything anymore. I don't have the energy to do that anymore. My energy is focused in other areas today that are far more beneficial for me and for everybody that I come in contact with. And thank God, but I do need to stay vigilant, and I need to know what my enemy is. So for all those times that I got asked, why Tyler? I don't know, because I never looked at them. That's why. It's not because I wasn't smart enough to figure it out. It's not because I didn't care enough. It wasn't because I didn't want it enough. It's because I didn't do it. I didn't stop and actually look at the things that were creating this illness inside of me. Once I did that, I had a very clear understanding of what my objective was going forward. Did I feel relief? Not immediately. No, there was no pink cloud after I did a thorough step 5. I felt exhausted. I felt like I had just gotten over the flu. I was spiritually, emotionally just drained, but I had never felt closer to God in my life. And that, if I pay attention to how my experience played out, and I pay attention to what it tells me in the book, this is the first time I'm actually relieved from the desire to drink, do drugs. Why? Because I don't have that as my enemy anymore. Drugs and alcohol are not my enemy. They were my best friend for a long time. What's my enemy? The things I just uncovered in my step 5. The fact that I can actually see another human being has my back and wants to fight these things with me. Well, no wonder I don't think I need a drink today. But if I look at all of this stuff on my step 5 and I try and apply that to today, well, no wonder I was drinking. That's unmanageable for anyone. For sure it is. And I start to feel the nearness of my creator like I'd never felt before. I started, in the days leading up to that, I could feel something coming. I could feel the presence of something, but it wasn't quite near yet. And I truly believe that my higher power wanted me to get to work. Do it, Tyler. My higher power had my back through so many situations, and all it ever wanted was for me to step up to the plate and try. And then it saw me do that in a step 5. And it saw me be honest and open and humble and willing, and all of these great characteristics that it did give me. These were the parts of me that I got to keep. They weren't the unsellable goods that I had to get rid of. These were the things that made me who I am today. And then my creator sees that and joins me in that fight and says, I'm here. Let's do this. And I can feel it because I've taken away these things that block me. All of the things that I looked at in my step 5, all of those defects on the tree and those 4 roots, that is what kept me from my higher power. I was so busy trying to put out all those fires that I couldn't just see that if I let it go, I can actually have this connection with something that's so much greater than I am. And today I wake up every day and I just ask for guidance. I ask for direction. In those moments, I ask to be relieved of it, and I give gratitude today when I am faced with selfishness, dishonesty, fear, or resentment, because I understand that this is what I asked for in my step 7. This is not happening to me. This is an experience that's greater than me, and I don't have to have all the variables. I can just accept the fact that God's given me this opportunity to grow and be free from those things and have victory over them. Thank you. That's what I asked for. I prayed for that in my step 7, and you're granting it to me in my step 10. What a wonderful gift. And now I get to go out and share that with other people. That's why I'll never shut up about this. I think I'm out of time. Thanks, guys.